Good afternoon. My name is Aditya Kaul. I'm a research director at Tractica, and I have the lucky privilege of leading the next two panel discussions. I hope to keep you guys in the room for the next hour or so. Otherwise, I would have failed. So the first panel discussion that I'm going to be leading is talking about AI. So at Tractica, we are a market research firm. We basically publish research and analysis and provide consulting services, specifically in the area of AI and robotics. So I'm a little bit of an outsider in the sense that I'm not from the auto industry, so I bring a certain kind of outsider view. Also, I'm going to try to bring a little bit of a provocative view today, as sort of I have a sort of more horizontal view of AI, and so automotive is one of the areas. Within the automotive sector, actually, we've done a bit of market analysis, looking at the whole AI software opportunity. It's about a $60 billion market opportunity by 2025. And out of that, $12 billion is actually just on the automotive side. So it's about a 15% opportunities, just the automotive sector. And within automotive, I mean, AI can be applied in multiple areas. So everything from driverless cars, which is things like object detection, doing SLAM, through to detecting driver fatigue through cameras in the car, or by providing personalized services, which we're going to talk about today. So I have a really good panel today. So I'll just ask the panelists to come on stage. So we have Holger from German Auto, and we have Timo from Xevo. So before we sort of start, what I'll try and do is ask the panelists to just introduce themselves, just a short introduction, then we'll sort of go into the discussion.
Great, thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. Almost the last session, so happy that you made it. Holger Weiss, CEO and founder of German Auto Labs. We are building a digital assistant for the car, actually a conversational intelligence that helps you to manage your digital life, the contextual environment, and the cognitive load while driving. And initially, we're going to start this for each and every car with the retrofit aftermarket solution, but we also offering this as a white label embedded solution to OEMs.
Yeah, my name is Timo Bauer. I'm with Xevo. We are a connected car supplier, tier 1 supplier for infotainment and anything that supports the customer experience in the car. So we're actually going down the stack all the way to, or up in that regard, to mobile edge computing. And we have several solutions in that regard.
Great. So to kick off things, and before I sort of start, I just want to mention that we'll have time at the end for questions. So please put your questions up on Slido. I'm hoping that we have enough time for that. So to begin with, I think what I would want to start off with is, where are we in terms of sort of personalization of services within the auto industry? What really works? What doesn't work? And maybe if we can limit it to level 3 automation and below, just looking at cars where there's actually a driver at the seat, rather than looking at sort of the future, maybe, and then we can look at that as well. But to begin with, where do you see personalization of services today? Maybe, Timo, you want to start off?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think right now the personalization is not so much around the person, more about the car, right, and its safety, right? I mean, maybe you can personalize it and saying, hey, if I'm not in a great mood, please drive a little bit closer to the other guy, to piss him off. But otherwise, it's obviously just around the car and safety, right? So I don't see there's a lot of personalization, right? Because it's more about the car profile than the user profile today, right? Which will obviously change.
Yeah, no, and I would agree to what Timo just said. Fundamentally, personalization so far in automotive is more about the color of the car than of the functions of the car. And that has a lot to do with the fact that we do not really have a homogeneous experience in it, and there is a lot of, let's say, lack in customer-consumer experience. I mean, I recently read a number that almost 80% of luxury cars when they got back to the dealer for the first inspection, have the original settings of the first day. So I mean, while people paying apparently something like $10,000–$15,000 for actually doing everything in the car, they don't use it. And this is exactly coming back to your point where I think AI, or I mean, let's call it intelligent systems. AI is a big term. Is coming into the play and say, okay, I understand what your preferences are because of things I either know of you before or that I'm learning while you're using this platform.
So I just want to sort of dig a bit deeper into what are these services, what kinds of services can we expect to see? And I sort of want to bring in the mobile, in terms of as a sort of context, or maybe as a comparison of what users get on the mobile today. And do you expect sort of similar kind of experience in the car? Where, I mean, from presentations I've seen over the last few days, it looks like that seems like a benchmark that everyone's like working towards, that, okay, this is what you get on the mobile today, and this is what we can enable in the car. Or do you see it that way, or do you see it differently? And so if you can talk a little bit about what can be enabled, that would be great. If there's nothing today, what's coming?
No, I mean, I'm always a little bit cautious to compare a car with a mobile phone. I mean, having worked for Nokia and having heard over and over that the car industry is failing like Nokia, I'm a little bit tired of that, right? A car is simply not a mobile phone. But from the level of personalization, I mean, what we saw in the mobile phone industry is that from personalization driven by the model I was using or the color I was getting in the hardware, it drove completely to a service personalization. So what type of services, how do they interact with me, etc. And I think that is something where we definitely will see a switch rather soon, where we will see that people, there are elements of convenience like whatever seating and heating and all of that, and that definitely will go way deeper with the general, let's say, settings that are not only in the car and so on, moving more into what type of experience this car provides me in a level 3, 4, 5 experience, inside and outside and contextually of the car.
Yeah, I mean, for us, and when we work with our OEM partners, the first level of personalization is obviously what do I see in the car, and is it tied to the person or not? And right now that's not the case, but it will be, right? So it's very simple to say, okay, we just show the apps that the user will use on the phone. If I'm a Spotify user and I'm listening to it all the time, why should I show Pandora on the head unit too, right? Things like that. But coming back to the if you can experience the same on the mobile, well, I think the opportunity for the OEMs right now is to potentially even leapfrog a little bit as in the next step, because they have more data around the transit piece, right, the domain, than potentially others have. But they will also have access to all of the generic data around my life, calendar access, etc. So they could build an experience that go beyond and a little bit more customized for the car and around the car and around commuting, etc. So I think it should be more than that. Otherwise, they're gonna have a problem. Yeah.
Yeah, so that sort of brings me to my next question in terms of, so the mobile is a very sort of personal experience. It's yours. You don't share your mobile with your wife or your kids or your friends. But your car, you actually do, possibly share it with your friends, with your family. So when you talk about personalization in the car, it's not just about you. It's about maybe having a multi-person experience in the car. So how does an OEM or somebody like yourself who is working with the OEMs think about that? What can we enable in this sort of multi-person environment, even looking at further when you're doing like carpooling in a level 5 autonomous car, how is that going to look? How is that going to work?
Yeah, and that's obviously the challenge. But the user profile is really what they're working on, right? And versus the car profile, or you can tie a car profile to 2 user profiles. Mm-hmm. I mean, right now there's usually only, and even Alexa just introduced multiple profiles, right? So it's not like everybody has them already. Yeah. But I think they're starting to understand, I want to see who are the other members, who are the kids, right? Backseat entertainment, etc. So they need to manage multiple profiles. And they're really just at the beginning right now to get the infrastructure in place, right? And that's obviously big piece of what we are doing with them. Yeah.
Holger?
Yes, I mean, first of all, let me state a little bit provocative. I know a lot of guys who don't share their cars. So, if you spend $75,000, $80,000 for your car, you don't share it, believe me. That's, by the way, also a hurdle very much in level 5 type of car sharing fleets and pools. I talked to a lot of people who said, I never would sit into a car that belongs to someone else. So let's be realistic here. Ownership is something that will not go away in the next 5 years, and even not in the Silicon Valley. So, other than that, I think yes, it's a time of highly personalized type of user experience, but I also sometimes doubt maybe except of something like a Facebook feed or Instagram, etc., that is very personalized. And those, by the way, are also the platforms that I really would talk about AI these days, the big internet companies like Facebook, like Google, etc. But the level of personalization is otherwise not too high. I would say if you would compare in target groups what people really are using, you have a match of 80% of apps that kids are using compared with 80% of match of people of our age group are using. So I think we will have a multi-phase evolution here that really starts with what you said, that I will see certain levels of my experience if I get into a shared car, or even in my own car if I share this with that. And it might gonna get into a highly personalized type of experience when then I really enter a cross-modality pod in the morning, going to the office, and this pod now knows that I'm a Starbucks fan. And I mean, we all know these videos and examples, so I don't have to repeat that. But I don't think that too many people at the moment would expect this as part of a sharing platform or of a car.
Right. So that sort of takes me into a little bit of a sort of a provocative sort of question in terms of the audience, I guess, here, which is that AI today, if you look at AI, it's largely controlled by the internet companies. They have the best talent, they have the best algorithms, they have the biggest, and most powerful data centers to train these algorithms. And they also have a lot of the data. So, I mean, as an end user, they know where I visit. I mean, they know that I go to a certain Starbucks. I mean, even though so they can basically track that location data. They can track visits into a specific, they also have indoor coverage now. So I mean, they have a lot of the key assets that you need to build a good AI platform, right? And today we've seen some, there was a very good presentation from BMW where they're talking about, and they've launched this new data scheme where they're providing a B2B service to third parties now. So it's interesting to see that the OEMs are starting to sort of act on it and take notice and sort of build, at least on the data part, which is kind of the fuel for AI. So the question I'm trying to get at is, are we moving to a future which is basically multiple AI systems, which basically are in two buckets? One bucket where basically all of the AIs target you when you're outside the car. So when you're in the home, or your office, or you're on the street. And the second AI sort of bucket of AI systems which are in the car. I mean, is that the future that we are kind of building towards, or you see sort of a mix of things? Or, do you have any views on that? Maybe Timo, you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, for us, I think it has to, just exporting your data outside, okay, you may get some money for it, but to be honest, a lot of that is available through other sources too. Like if you ask Google, they said, oh, we have the same data, right? But I think where the OEMs have an opportunity, or if they miss it out, it could be a problem, is that they need to start, not necessarily the AI piece, but control and gather the relevant data that's around commuting and transit, right? Build up a domain of data, right? Versus focusing on, okay, I have the best speech recognition. That's going to be, it's going to be available probably for free at some point, right? So, but if you don't have the data underneath, then you're out of the value chain there. And I think that's an opportunity that is not 100% understood yet in the OEM world, right? To build this up, or they don't think they have the the knowledge or the power to do so, but we certainly believe that they can augment an experience by building up their own domain knowledge, and then you can build machine learning models, etc., on top, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I would agree with everything Timo just said. Just to add to that, I think you just drafted the perfect scenario from the OEM perspective, right? I mean, if this would in any way be possible that there is AI inside of the car experience and outside of the car experience, a lot of discussions, if not to say challenges of this industry we are all in would be solved, right? But this is very likely not the case, as Timo also just elaborated. I mean, there are these big companies that we're all using every day and who know a lot about it. And I think doing any contextual predictive experience better than Google now is a type of a good luck wish. And then it's about what really area and sector I have my know-how and my domain knowledge in, right? And I think that is something that we saw over the past 4 or 5 years, that the big internet companies try to enter the automotive ecosystem environment, and there was a strong pushback from the OEMs for good reasons, because they said, see, our domain knowledge is the platform, is the car, and that is something that we might going to contribute to a holistic experience inside, outside of the car, but we will not really give this away to you. And then the guys try to build own cars as a response, and so far we know the result. On the other side, I simply believe that we will have very generic AI and personalization experience that links back to those everyday experiences, and we have also this domain experience, like in our case when we're talking about building a digital co-driver, a digital assist made for the car. I'm very aware that there is a Watson and Amazon, etc., outside Cortana, but you definitely would admit that Alexa is not a kind of a co-driver intelligence. And that is something that you only can train into the car. And that is something with respect to predictive maintenance and experience. I think the OEM has a big part of that. But it will actually merge and migrate into one holistic experience.
Great. So talking a little bit about edge versus cloud, I guess in an AI context, this sort of question comes up a lot. Where do you sort of process the AI? Do you do it at the edge or do you do it in the cloud? Now, if you look at, for me, it basically depends on the use case. If you look at a car, the object recognition, which is meant, or SLAM, or some of these high-end processing sort of functions, are very hard to run at the edge, because the hardware today, if you take the best GPU today, you basically would fry the car. If you're doing a training at the, I was talking to a few engineers, they were telling me that the heat dissipated in a car basically would just melt the, I mean, you have a big problem there. You need basically super cooled, containers to solve that problem. But doing things like, like personalized music service within a car, or tuning it to your favorite temperature, or taking you to your favorite Starbucks. Those kinds of algorithms are much easier to run on today's hardware, and basic hardware, which doesn't require that much of specialized kit. So I guess the question is, if you are an OEM, if you are a sort of solution provider, is it the fact that you basically just do everything at the edge? I mean, the cloud doesn't really feature in your plans in terms of system architecture. If you look at a car, and if you look at it from a security aspect, a privacy aspect, it's best to keep everything at the edge rather than do it in the cloud. So is that how you see it, or do you see some of the stuff that can be done on the cloud? I mean, the cloud, you have to talk about connectivity and some of those sort of issues. So what would you, I mean, Timo, you building stuff for the OEMs a lot, and sort of based on what I heard, it looked like it's not that easy. It's not that, the partition is not that clear right now. I mean, there's stuff that you can do in the cloud, there's stuff that you can do at the edge?
Yeah, I mean, we obviously realized a couple of years ago that we need to have logic on the edge, and we're quite a mobile edge computing company, right? And so we integrated, but there's just from a high level, it really depends on the use case. I think anything that has to do with music service, or should I get a Starbucks coffee now, what I usually drink, you can really do that in the cloud and have recommendations come up. There's no real edge processing really needed, right? But if you look at other scenarios, you know, there's obviously the whole ADAS thing, but a great scenario where we have a model running is the Amber Alert, right? Where you look for a specific license plate and you leverage the front-facing cameras of the car. So we created a model there where we actually just uploaded a couple of kilobytes, just the license plate itself, to like, let's say, 1 million cars in the US, in the Chicago area. And just the one that the model sits on the edge, right? It's a simple model, and just sees the car and then sends back a video stream. Just one device sends it back, right? So there's not a lot of data leverage. And what we focus on is running multiple models on the same data stream on the edge. That's really where we have a lot of competence in, right? And then also filter out all the data so that you don't have to send it to the cloud. But a lot of the personalization services, they're actually coming from the cloud, originated, right? So it's more the push towards the head unit that's relevant. So there we are doing everything in the cloud.
Isn't there a privacy angle here? I mean, what BMW was showing, I mean, you need to get consent from the user to send that data, or give access to the developer to, you know, so as a user, I was just wondering how many times do I have to sort of accept, you know, a service request from a third party, that doesn't seem like the best user interface. I mean, the privacy question about doing everything in the cloud, isn't that something that the OEMs can actually solve by doing everything at the edge? Just like Apple is sort of doing it, you know, now actually they do a lot of the machine learning on the phone.
Yeah, no, it's a good use case. It depends really on who the partner is. A great example I mentioned yesterday is we're working with a very large coffee chain, and I mean we are based in Seattle, right? And they don't give Amazon all the data they need, right, to get a better Alexa skill in there, because they see them as a potential competitor. None of those partners see the automotive as a competitor, so they are more willing to provide relevant data, your coffee drinking behavior, et cetera, for us to manage for the OEM and build something around it, right? So let's not forget that, right? Whereas Google, or specifically Amazon, especially in the merchant field, everybody sees as a competitor, right? Yeah.
So the user data consent, or that's definitely something that somehow doesn't hold people back from using their smartphones, right? And I think that is something. You're right, but on the other side, I think it's still good that we have these discussions, that to a certain extent I have to agree as a user what's happening with my data. Because, I mean, this is not a data discussion here, but in all of that data and personalization discussion, the OEM has a very strong opinion, the big internet companies have a very strong opinion, the tier ones have a very strong opinion, but sometimes the user is not really being asked in that discussion. So, about the edge, I mean, see, look to the stock price of NVIDIA, right? I mean, that's a kind of insane what's happening with this company over the past 2 years, and it was a gaming CPU company that now is actually moving fast up into quantum computing, etc. And that's local processing power. And a lot of that, and therefore I think if we talk about personalization, fine, we can do a lot of the AI and training locally, etc. But the big issue and the big discussion that we will have is with respect to autonomous driving, and how we solve this element if a car is, I think, producing something like a terabyte data per hour, right? Yeah. And that is something where there will be a lot of edge computing required to make this somehow meaningful, at least in the network technologies that we know by today. So I think when we talk about personalization in the car, etc., safety, etc., is one element, but those services that we just discussed, they might gonna play not that big role with respect to the overall picture as we see it today.
Okay. I will stop here in terms of my own questions. Let's see if there are any questions from the audience on Slido. Because we have about 5 minutes.
Yes, you have a couple. Sorry, just
Yeah.
getting up. You have 4 last time I saw.
Okay.
Do you want to read them, or should I read? 'Cause it's quite difficult.
No, it's fine. I can. So, the first one, if you don't recommend OEMs to develop their own personal assistant, do you think there's much money in the industry for the automakers?
Well, the question is.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, the question is if there's any if they don't do it, right? I mean, you can see it from both sides. I think it doesn't necessarily have to be their own. They obviously will work with partners there, but they have to have some personality on top what's out there. And I think in certain areas they need to clearly lead and drive the domain. And I mean, I think at some point the user expects, okay, my GM has a different personality than my Porsche, right? So, and I think they need to differentiate in that space, and that's why they need to build up expertise.
Yeah, and I also think it's something where there are different dimensions playing into that. I mean, even with shared mobility, etc., a lot of the OEMs will continue to maintain their brand and the brand value and the experience that we said before. And I think that is a domain that they cannot dare, on the one hand, to give away. And on the other side, you also have to see that, again, a co-driver is not a surgeon, is not an auditor, is not a lawyer, etc. We will see a group of vertical type of digital assistants, and therefore I think makes a lot of sense for the OEM to have their own assistant, but if they develop it their own, etc., that's a different discussion.
Okay. Second one is kind of similar in terms of Android Automotive. Do you guys want to take that one, or should we go to the next one in terms of the Android Automotive? What do you think will happen when OSs from the big players become ubiquitous, like Apple?
It's a good question. I think Google is obviously most advanced right now. There's obviously Android Auto, that's separate, right? But there's a couple of the OEMs leveraging Android as the operating system. The big question is, are they going to use Google Play services? And as far as I know, some of them are, so they don't have to manage their own stuff. And then at some point, you got to be careful, obviously, how much of the data you give to Google and what of the services you want to give to them versus you want to control yourself. Obviously, for us as a tier 1 supplier, it's way easier to build experience on top of Android than it is on other environments. So you have to support everything. But if majority of the people uses an iPhone, they have, first of all, they're not connected to Google services yet. So obviously that's where Google is interested to enter the market. So I think you just have to be careful. And also, what data do you give to them? How you negotiate that deal is the key, right? And what you claim first right of refusal on services, commerce, etc., where you want to make sure you keep control, right?
Yeah. Okay. The next one is on speed of adoption of digital services is likely to vary. So basically, there are going to be people who trust, the service provider versus not trust. So I mean, there's more trust possibly in like an OEM than maybe a Google. I mean, anyone want to tackle that? Or?
I don't know if that is true what you just say, because a lot of people using all of those services that we know without mistrusting them. Sometimes they better should, I think. No, see, I think that is something very true, and that not only a question of age, it's also a question of cultural background, etc. I mean, Germans being here in Germany are usually very suspicious with giving the data away. The Scandinavian countries are more open, and Israel, it's a kind of related very much to safety, etc. So that is something that we will see, and if we talk about global services, that will require very specific type of strategies. But for me, I think the best way is, first of all, to accept it will take certain time. Secondly, not everything will work. And thirdly, you need to communicate transparently what you do, and explain people, and then they will understand.
So I guess the next one is for you, Holger. What's the recent status of Chris?
I guess it's for me, right? So, Chris, for all of you not knowing that, is a personal assistant that German Auto Labs is developing, and in the first version for a retrofit solution, putting in every car. But as I said initially, also with a target to embed them in cars in the future in an embedded solution. So Chris is like a kid. Chris is talking. German and English so far, not always meaningful things, right? This is what it is with infants, with babies. So you have to grow them, but it's getting better day by day and starting to walk and looks pretty. That's something I'm very proud of, right? It's a beautiful little girl, boy, linking to the next one, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's Chris is a neutral type of name, so it's on its way, and let's see. I mean, updates to be followed.
Great, thank you so much. That was a very, very good panel discussion. Thank you all, and thank you to Holger
Thank you.
and team.
Thank you.